Picture this. It's the week before Christmas, and somewhere across town, your entire family has already decided how you'll spend the holiday. The sleeping arrangements, the meals you'll cook, the children you'll watch. Not one of them has bothered to ask if you're even free. That was my week. I stood outside my parents' kitchen door and listened while my mother assigned me a bed in the basement. My father congratulated himself on not having to pay for a sitter, and my sister told the rest of the family I had already agreed to run Christmas Eve, Christmas morning, and their entire adults-only dinner. I hadn't agreed to any of it. I hadn't even been asked. For years, being single and without children of my own had made my calendar look empty to everyone else, a blank space they filled in whenever it suited them. The year before, I had missed a call that could have changed my career because I was watching 4 kids in a basement while the rest of the family ate dinner upstairs and never once noticed I was gone. This year, they were planning to do the exact same thing again, only bigger. So I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't send an angry text to the family group chat. I walked back to my car, opened my phone, and booked the last open seat on a flight to Florida with an old college friend. Then I let my family keep planning their perfect Christmas around a woman who had no intention of showing up. Every reservation, every dinner, every promise my sister made on my behalf, all of it depended on me staying quiet and obedient until the very last possible minute. And I did stay quiet. Right up until Christmas Eve morning, when I was already sitting at the airport gate and my mother's first phone call came through. Before I tell you exactly what happened when they realized I was hundreds of miles away, the accusations that flew, the almost $3,000 emergency none of them saw coming, and the secret my sister had been hiding about where the sitter money actually went, I want to know something. Watching from where? Please comment. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 28. By the week before Christmas, my family had already worked out exactly how I would spend the holiday. They had simply forgotten to include me in the conversation. I was standing outside my parents' kitchen when I overheard my mother going over sleeping arrangements, dinner reservations, and the children's schedule, speaking the way a hotel manager might. Then she said I could take the basement room, since I would need to stay close to the little ones anyway. My father said hiring a sitter would be a waste of money when I was already available. My older sister had apparently promised the whole family that I would handle Christmas Eve, Christmas morning, and the adults-only dinner they had booked months earlier. I had agreed to none of this. I hadn't even been part of the discussion. For years, being single and childless had made my time look empty to them, an open calendar they could fill whenever their own plans mattered more. The Christmas before, I had missed an important work call while everyone else celebrated upstairs. This year, they were preparing to repeat that mistake on an even bigger scale. I walked back to my car without saying a word to anyone. I didn't cry, I didn't argue, and I didn't send some dramatic message to the family. I opened my phone, found the Florida trip my college friend had invited me on, and booked the last available seat. Then I let my family keep planning a perfect Christmas around a woman who wouldn't be there. By Christmas Eve, every reservation, every promise, and every assigned task depended on my going along with it. When they finally realized I was hundreds of miles away, the first scream came through my phone. What followed exposed far more than a ruined dinner, and it forced my family to learn the real cost of treating my time as something that belonged to them. The invitation to Florida had come 3 weeks earlier from my college friend Jenna Ruiz. She had rented a small place near St. Augustine with 2 other women from our university days after one of their original group had to cancel. At the time, I told her I probably couldn't make it because Christmas was complicated. That was the word I always reached for whenever I didn't want to admit that my family treated my free time as shared property. The conversation I overheard outside my parents' kitchen made the complication painfully simple. My mother, Helen, wasn't asking whether I could help. My father, Walter, wasn't wondering whether I already had plans. My older sister, Natalie, had already built the entire holiday around the assumption that I would hand mine over. I sat in my car and went back over everything I'd heard. Natalie and her husband, Mark, were arriving with their 3 children on December 23rd. 2 cousins were coming the next day with 4 more kids between them. My parents had booked an adults-only dinner at a downtown hotel, and Natalie had scheduled a long salon appointment right before it. Their original babysitting reservation had been canceled. According to my father, paying holiday rates for a sitter would be ridiculous when Emily could just do it. The casual way he said my name bothered me even more than the plan itself. He said it the way someone might mention a folding table kept in the garage, something useful, familiar, and already owned. I wish I could say this was the first time. The Christmas before, Natalie had handed me a list before I'd even taken off my coat. Snacks at 6, baths at 7:30, keep everyone downstairs during the adults' gift exchange. I laughed because I assumed it was a joke. She just stared at me and said, "You knew we needed you." That night, while the rest of the family ate prime rib upstairs, I sat on the basement carpet with a paper plate that had gone cold. At 9 o'clock, my manager called about a last-minute opening on a project team I'd been trying to join for months. I missed the call because 2 kids were fighting and another needed help finding pajamas. By the time I called back the next morning, the spot had gone to someone else. Natalie told me I was being dramatic when I brought it up. My mother said work opportunities came and went, but family memories were permanent. The memory that actually stayed with me wasn't the noise or the cold food. It was hearing everyone laughing upstairs and realizing no one had even noticed I was missing. In March, Natalie asked me to watch the kids for 1 urgent hour because Mark supposedly had a medical appointment. I rearranged a client meeting and drove across town. When I got there, Mark was at work, completely healthy, and Natalie walked out the door wearing a spa robe under her coat. She said she was exhausted and deserved a break. When I pushed back, she reminded me that I didn't have anyone depending on me. In July, my parents invited me to a family barbecue, then asked me to watch the pool before I'd even set down my bag. In October, my mother volunteered me to help at Natalie's school fundraiser without mentioning it to me at all, until the organizer emailed me a schedule. Each incident on its own was small enough to brush off. Together, they added up to a system. They protected each other's time by spending mine. Sitting in the car, I finally asked myself a question I'd avoided for years. If love always meant I had to disappear, what exactly were they loving? I called Jenna. She picked up on the second ring and said, "Please tell me you changed your mind." I asked if the seat was still open. It was, but the price would go up at midnight. I booked it before I could talk myself out of it. Jenna asked if I planned on telling my family. I looked through the windshield at my parents' glowing kitchen window. They had spent weeks making plans that involved me without a single conversation. For once, I decided they could experience that same courtesy. I told Jenna I'd meet her at the airport on Christmas Eve. Then I took screenshots of the reservation, saved the confirmation email, and drove home. I felt guilty, but underneath the guilt was something steadier. It wasn't rage. It was the relief of finally turning down a role I had never agreed to in the first place. Over the next 3 days, the family group chat became a record of everything they believed they were entitled to take from me. Natalie posted a color-coded Christmas schedule that looked like a corporate retreat itinerary. Arrival times, meal assignments, gift exchange, family photos, hotel dinner, morning brunch. Next to every task involving the kids, she had typed my name. "Emily downstairs," one line read. "Emily handles dinner and bedtime," said another. Christmas morning included a 4-hour block labeled "Emily with kids while adults rest." Nobody asked whether the schedule actually worked for me. My mother replied with 3 heart emojis. My father wrote, "Perfect. This will save us a fortune." I stared at those messages for a long time. Then I saved screenshots and said nothing. The old version of me would have corrected them right away, then spent days negotiating 12 hours of childcare down to 6, as if I were haggling over a small slice of my own life. Staying quiet felt uncomfortable, but it also revealed something useful. Without me pushing back, they became more honest. Natalie announced she had canceled the backup sitter because we're covered. My mother said she'd moved 2 folding beds into the basement so I could sleep near the kids. When an aunt asked whether I might want the upstairs guest room instead, Natalie replied, "Emily won't care. She barely sleeps during the holidays anyway." That line almost broke my silence. Instead, I started packing. Jenna sent me a short list: swimsuit, comfortable shoes, 1 dinner outfit, sunscreen, and absolutely no guilt. I set the list beside my suitcase and added a folder with my work notes. I had a professional certification exam coming up in early January, and Florida would give me quiet mornings to study. That detail mattered. This trip wasn't just an escape from my family. It was a choice in favor of the future they kept asking me to put on hold. On Thursday, my father called while I was wrapping gifts. He didn't ask what time I'd be arriving. He asked whether my car had enough room to fit 2 extra booster seats. I told him I was busy and would call him back later. His response was impatient. "This is why we send schedules, Emily. Everyone needs to cooperate." I nearly laughed at the word everyone. Cooperation requires consent. What they wanted was obedience dressed up in wrapping paper. After the call, I pulled the gifts out of the big family bag and repacked them into shipping boxes. I mailed each one straight to my parents' house, with cards but no note explaining why I wouldn't be there. I didn't want anyone claiming I had ruined Christmas for the kids or withheld anything out of spite. My refusal had one target: the adults who had arranged their own freedom by taking mine without asking. Friday evening, Natalie sent me a private message. "Mom says you've been weird. Don't start drama this year. We all need a relaxing holiday." The hypocrisy of it stunned me. Natalie wanted relaxation so badly that she'd assigned me nearly 20 hours of unpaid work. I typed out a few answers and deleted them all. Finally, I wrote, "You should confirm every part of your plan with the people it involves." She replied with a laughing emoji. "You're involved. Your family." That message sealed my decision. Saturday morning, I checked into my flight online. My hands were shaking when the boarding pass appeared. For a few seconds, I pictured calling my mother, explaining everything, and giving them time to fix their plans. Then another message came in from her. "Please wear something presentable when the guests arrive. You can change into comfortable clothes once you take the kids downstairs." She had chosen my outfit for a job I had never accepted. I turned my phone face down. The urge to warn them wasn't kindness anymore. It was conditioning. They had trained me to shield them from the consequences of ignoring me. That afternoon, Jenna called to confirm where we'd meet at the airport. She heard the tension in my voice and asked if I was worried they'd be angry. I said yes. She asked whether their anger meant I'd actually done something wrong. I couldn't answer right away. That question stayed with me while I zipped up my suitcase. On Sunday, the day before Christmas Eve, my mother left a voicemail reminding me to arrive by 10 in the morning and to bring that patient attitude everyone loves about you. I listened to it twice, not because it was sweet, but because it laid out the role they'd written for me: patient, useful, quiet, and endlessly available. I saved the voicemail along with the screenshots. Then I turned off location sharing on my phone, scheduled a car to the airport, and set my suitcase by the door. I wasn't wondering anymore whether they'd be angry. I was wondering what they'd reveal once I stopped making their selfishness convenient. Christmas Eve started at 6 in the morning with my mother calling twice before my alarm even went off. I let both calls go to voicemail while I showered and got dressed. Her first message was practical, warning me that traffic would be heavy and I should leave early. Her second was sharper. Natalie had moved up her salon appointment and needed me there by 9:30. I carried my suitcase downstairs, climbed into the waiting car, and watched my apartment building disappear behind me. The driver asked if I was heading home for Christmas. I looked at the airport listed as my destination on his screen and said something like that. By 7:30, the group chat was already buzzing. My father asked who had moved the folding beds. Natalie complained that one of the kids had opened a wrapped gift early. My mother tagged me directly. "Please answer. We need to coordinate." I didn't answer because there was nothing to coordinate. They had never included me in the planning. They had only ever handed me tasks. At the airport, I met Jenna near security. She hugged me, glanced at my phone buzzing in my hand, and asked if I wanted her to hold on to it until we boarded. I said no. Avoiding the confrontation entirely would have let them rewrite the whole story later. I wanted to tell them, once and clearly, that their emergency was the direct result of their own assumptions. At 9:15, Natalie called. I answered. She skipped the hello. "Where are you? I need to leave in 15 minutes. I told her I was at the airport. There was a pause, then a short laugh. "Very funny. Which terminal are you picking Dad up from?" I told her I was flying to Florida. Her voice changed instantly. She accused me of abandoning the family, ruining everyone's plans, and acting like a teenager. I waited until she ran out of breath, then asked one question. "When did I agree to watch anyone?" She said, "Everyone knew you always did it." I told her that habit isn't the same as consent. Natalie lowered her voice and delivered the line she must have believed would put me back in my place. "Emily, you don't have a husband or kids. Your time isn't as complicated as ours." I had heard versions of that belief for years, but never spoken so plainly. My time didn't count because no one else had claimed it. I told her, "Then it should be easy for you to replace something you think has no value." She called me cruel and said she'd tell Mom. "You won't have to," I said. "She's calling right now." I ended the call and answered my mother. Her first words were exactly as frantic as I'd expected. "Why aren't you here yet? Everyone's waiting." Behind her, several people were talking over each other. A child was crying about missing shoes. My father was shouting that the caterer had arrived 2 hours early. Natalie was demanding car keys. I looked through the terminal window at the plane being prepped and felt something inside me go very calm. "Don't wait up," I said. "I'm enjoying my own vacation." For a second, my mother said nothing. Then chaos broke out behind her. Natalie yelled that I had done this on purpose. My father asked whether the hotel would refund 6 dinner reservations. Something crashed to the floor, and my mother snapped at everyone to be quiet. When she came back on the line, her voice was low and furious. "You knew we were depending on you." "You were depending on an agreement I never made," I said. "We are your family. Family members ask." She said the sitter had been canceled because Natalie had assured them I was available. Then Natalie shouted from the background that Mom was the one who'd said I couldn't possibly have better plans. Their united front cracked in under a minute. My mother tried a different approach. My father had put down a non-refundable deposit on the adults-only dinner. Natalie had already paid for her salon package. Relatives were arriving any minute. Without me, someone would have to stay home. "Yes," I said. "One of the parents will have to stay with their own kids." She reacted like I'd suggested something outrageous. Then she said, "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I could have listed every holiday, every weekend, every canceled meeting, every cold plate, every last-minute demand. Instead, I kept it simple. "I'm not repaying you. I'm declining unpaid work." My father grabbed the phone. He ordered me to change my flight and promised to reimburse the fee later. I told him boarding would start soon. He said if I got on that plane, I shouldn't expect the family to forget it. "I hope you don't," I told him. "I hope you remember to ask next time." He called that disrespectful. Then an aunt's voice rose in the background, asking why they had canceled professional childcare without confirming with me first. My father told her it wasn't her business. She answered loud enough for me to hear. "You made it everyone's business when you invited us into this mess." That was the moment the argument shifted. Up until then, my parents and Natalie had assumed they could paint me as selfish and get instant backup. Instead, the relatives were starting to ask real questions. My mother took the phone again and demanded to know what I'd told people. I said I hadn't told anyone anything. Their own schedule was sitting right there in the group chat. She went quiet. I could hear Natalie whispering, "Delete it." I took a screenshot before the message vanished. Jenna touched my arm and pointed toward our boarding group. I told my mother I had to go. "Emily, if you hang up, don't call me when you regret this." I looked at the gate, then at the saved schedule with my name next to every task. "The only thing I regret," I said, "is teaching you that I would always say yes." I hung up, turned off my phone, and boarded the plane. When we landed in Florida, I turned my phone back on and found 43 messages waiting. The family group chat had split into 3 camps. My parents insisted I had canceled at the last minute. Natalie claimed I had promised her privately. Several relatives asked them to produce the message where I supposedly agreed. They couldn't. My Aunt Carol, the same woman I'd heard in the background earlier, had reposted Natalie's deleted schedule from her own screenshot, with every mention of my name circled. "This isn't a holiday plan," she wrote. "This is a work roster." My cousin Dennis asked if anyone had even offered to pay me. No one answered him. The adults-only dinner had become the center of the fight. My father had booked a private room at an expensive restaurant to impress 2 relatives visiting from out of state, and the deposit was non-refundable, so canceling on Christmas Eve meant losing the whole amount. Natalie refused to stay home, since she'd bought a new dress and planned the evening months in advance. My mother argued that as the grandmother, she'd already done her share of childcare over the years. My father said he was the host and couldn't miss his own dinner. 3 adults who had treated my presence as automatic were now arguing over whose time mattered least. The irony was so exact, I didn't need to add a thing. Jenna and I collected our bags, met up with the others, and drove to the rental house. I'd imagined feeling triumphant. Instead, I felt raw and oddly on edge, like someone might show up and tell me the trip had been canceled because my family needed me after all. Jenna noticed me checking my phone every few minutes and asked what I was looking for. "Proof that I'm the villain," I admitted. She said, "They might call you one. That doesn't make it true." At the house, I got a private message from Natalie. "Send me the screenshots you took. Mom's blaming me." I stared at it. She wasn't apologizing. She wanted ammunition to redirect the blame. I wrote back, "The screenshots show all 3 of you." She called immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father messaged saying an emergency childcare agency could send 2 caregivers, but with the holiday rate, transportation charge, and same-day booking fee, the total came to nearly $2,000. He expected Natalie and Mark to cover half. Natalie replied that my parents had created this whole mess by volunteering me in the first place. My mother replied that Natalie had assured them I would go along with it. Mark, who had stayed almost silent up to that point, asked why his wife had canceled the original sitter before ever speaking to me. Natalie told him not to air private matters in the family chat. He answered, "You made Emily's private time a family resource. We can talk about the bill here too." That sentence shifted the tone all over again. By late afternoon, the agency needed immediate payment or it would give up the booking. My father paid, then posted that Christmas was becoming financially absurd. Aunt Carol replied, "It got expensive the moment you discovered Emily's time had a market value." I read that line 3 times. For years, my family had dressed up my unpaid help as affection. The second strangers put a price tag on the same work. Everyone suddenly understood it was labor. They just hadn't wanted to admit that when I was the one doing it. My mother called again. This time she sounded controlled, which was somehow more unsettling than shouting. She said relatives were judging her because I had let a misunderstanding spread. She wanted me to post in the group chat that I had failed to communicate my plans. I asked whether she'd also admit she had failed to ask. She said Christmas wasn't the time to assign blame. It had apparently been the right time to assign me 20 hours of childcare, though. She told me not to twist her words. I pulled up the saved voicemail where she'd instructed me to arrive early and dress presentably before taking the kids downstairs, and I sent the audio file to the group chat. Then I added one message for clarity. I was never asked, and I never agreed. I found out about the plan by overhearing it. I hope everyone has a safe holiday, but I won't take responsibility for decisions made without me. I put my phone on silent. That message did what no argument could. It cleared the fog. My parents could no longer pretend there had been some misunderstanding, and Natalie could no longer claim there had been a private promise. Relatives started remembering their own versions of the same pattern. One cousin recalled her husband being volunteered to fix a fence at a past reunion. An uncle mentioned being charged for groceries after being invited as a guest. The conversation grew from just my absence into a pattern my parents had spent years dressing up as family tradition. That evening, while we ate at a small restaurant near the rental house, Dennis sent me the latest update. The emergency caregivers had arrived, but the adults-only dinner still fell apart anyway. My father and Mark argued over the bill. Natalie showed up late because she'd spent an hour defending herself in the chat. My mother cried in the hotel lobby after Aunt Carol refused to back her version of events. Several relatives left before dessert. The private room my father had booked to show off a perfect family became the place where everyone finally discussed how manufactured that perfection really was. I didn't laugh when I read it. I just set my phone down. Their Christmas hadn't fallen apart because I left. It fell apart because I had stopped holding up a structure that was built on my silence. Christmas morning started quietly for me and expensively for them. I woke before the others, made coffee, and reviewed my exam notes while the house was still asleep. At 8, I got a message from the childcare agency confirming that my father had listed me as the family's usual caregiver when he explained the emergency booking. Mark had forwarded it after finding the receipt in Natalie's email. The agency's total had climbed because the family asked the caregivers to stay through brunch. With gratuity, transportation, and holiday fees added in, the bill came to more than $2,700. My father wanted Natalie and Mark to reimburse him immediately. Mark refused until Natalie explained what had happened to the original reservation. That's when another lie came out. Natalie hadn't canceled the professional sitter because she believed I had agreed to help. She'd canceled because the sitter required a deposit, and she wanted that money for her salon package and hotel dinner instead. She'd planned to pressure me into it later. My mother had known. My father had approved because he liked the savings. Everyone had their own excuse, but the plan underneath was the same: spend freely on themselves and use my time to balance the budget. Mark sent me a private apology. He admitted he'd benefited from the arrangement for years without asking enough questions, and said he and Natalie needed to have a serious conversation about money, honesty, and how she treated me. I thanked him, but I didn't comfort him. That was another habit I was done with. Their discomfort didn't create a new job for me. Around 10, Natalie posted a furious message claiming I had humiliated her marriage and turned the relatives against our parents. She ended it with, "I hope your vacation was worth destroying this family." I almost fired back emotionally. Instead, I opened a spreadsheet I'd started months earlier after a therapist suggested tracking favors that left me resentful. It had dates, hours, canceled plans, fuel costs, and the excuses I'd been given each time. I'd never planned to send it to anyone. Now I calculated the hours of childcare I'd provided over the previous 2 years and multiplied it by a modest local rate. The total came to $65 and $80, not counting the job opportunity I'd lost. I took a screenshot and sent it only to Natalie, my mother, and my father. "This is the value of the labor you took without paying for it," I wrote. "I'm not asking for reimbursement. I'm showing you what you've been calling love." My father replied that families don't send each other invoices. I said, "Then families shouldn't build their budgets around unpaid labor they never asked for." My mother accused me of keeping score. She was right. I'd started keeping score because they'd always expected me to lose. By noon, more fallout arrived. Aunt Carol announced she would be hosting the next Christmas, and that any childcare would be arranged ahead of time, paid for by the parents who needed it, and confirmed in writing. Several relatives backed her right away. My mother had hosted Christmas for 14 years and treated it as proof that she was the center of the family. Losing that role hurt her more than the agency bill did. She called Carol ungrateful. Carol answered that hospitality stops being hospitality the moment a guest is quietly turned into staff. My father dropped out of the group chat, but not before accusing everyone of overreacting. Dennis forwarded me one last exchange from the hotel. A visiting relative had asked where I was, and my mother had said I preferred beaches to family. Carol played the voicemail I'd shared for the table. It went silent. My mother left before the meal was over. The image she'd spent years protecting, generous hostess, devoted mother, perfect Christmas planner, didn't survive contact with her own words. I felt the old urge to call and smooth things over. Then I asked myself why I was responsible for protecting a reputation that depended on hiding how I'd been treated. I put the phone away. Jenna and I spent the afternoon at a holiday market, then went back to the house for dinner. I didn't need their celebration to fail completely. I just needed the truth to stay visible long enough that they couldn't push me back into place. That night, my mother sent one last message. "We need to talk when you get back. There will be consequences." I read it without any fear. For the first time, consequences weren't a threat reserved just for me. They were already sitting on my parents' table, printed on a childcare receipt, repeated across the family chat, and reflected in every relative who now understood what their perfect holidays had actually cost me. I flew back to Austin 4 days after Christmas with a finished study plan, a sunburn on one shoulder, and no intention of apologizing. My parents asked me to come over that evening. I agreed on one condition. Natalie and Mark would be there, and no one would interrupt while I spoke. When I arrived, the folding beds were still stacked in the hallway. The house looked ordinary, but the room felt different. My father had the agency receipt sitting on the table. My mother's eyes were swollen. Natalie sat next to Mark with her arms crossed, and for once, she didn't look confident that the family would automatically take her side. My father opened by saying my behavior had been immature. I laid out printed copies on the table, the group schedule, the deleted message, my mother's voicemail transcript, and Natalie's private message claiming my time mattered less. "We can discuss my behavior," I said, "after we agree on what actually happened." My mother tried calling it a misunderstanding. Natalie blamed my mother for volunteering me. My father blamed Natalie for canceling the sitter. I let them talk until the blame circled back around to me. Then I said the real difference between them wasn't innocence, it was who expected to avoid paying the bill. I laid out my boundaries. They would never volunteer my time again. Any request for help had to come to me directly, with reasonable notice, and no wasn't going to come with punishment attached. I wasn't sleeping in a basement to stay near the kids. I wasn't missing work, exams, trips, or rest because another adult had planned around my compliance. And most importantly, they needed to correct the story with the entire family. My mother objected right away. She said she'd already been embarrassed enough. "Embarrassment isn't the same as accountability," I told her. Natalie said I was enjoying this. I told her I'd enjoyed Florida. This meeting was simply the price of having a relationship with me. Mark asked what correction I wanted. I handed them a short written statement. Emily was never asked to provide childcare and never agreed to it. We made plans based on an assumption, canceled paid help, and blamed her when our plan fell apart. That was wrong. My father refused to send it. I stood up and picked up my coat. My mother panicked when she realized I was actually willing to walk out without another fight. She asked if I was cutting them off. I told her their next move would answer that question. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then Mark took out his phone and sent the statement from his own account, adding that he had benefited from the assumption and was sorry. Natalie stared at him, furious, but the message was already out. Aunt Carol replied with a single line, "Thank you for finally telling the truth." My mother sent the statement 10 minutes later. My father waited until the next morning. The apology didn't fix everything, and I never pretended it would. Natalie and Mark started counseling after the fight over the canceled sitter, and the hidden spending came out. They reimbursed my parents for half of the emergency agency bill, which meant Natalie's planned winter getaway was canceled. My father covered the other half and ate the loss on the hotel deposit. My mother wasn't hosting the next family Christmas, and several relatives stopped letting her assign them tasks without asking first. None of these were punishments I engineered. They were costs that had always existed, finally landing on the people who created them. Natalie didn't speak to me for almost 2 months. When she finally called, she didn't start with an apology. She asked if I understood how hard parenting was. I told her I did, which was exactly why she should respect the time of anyone she asked for help. She went quiet, then admitted she'd assumed I would always give in, because I always had before. That was the closest she came to being honest with me. I told her I was open to rebuilding our relationship, but not the old arrangement. The next time she asked me to babysit, she gave me 3 weeks' notice, offered to pay, and accepted it without complaint when I said no. My parents changed more slowly. My mother still says things like, "After everything we've done," but they don't move me the way they used to. My father got a lot more careful about group schedules. He learned that writing someone's name in a box doesn't create consent. In January, I passed my certification exam. It helped me land the project role I'd missed out on the year before, along with a raise that covered the cost of the Florida trip several times over. Jenna told me the vacation had been the best last-minute decision we'd ever made. She was wrong about one part. It hadn't been last minute at all. It had been years overdue. Some people call what I did revenge. Maybe it was. I didn't sabotage a dinner, expose a secret, or invent a punishment. I simply stopped supplying the free labor that let everyone else avoid the consequences of their own choices. The chaos in my mother's voice that Christmas Eve wasn't something I created. It was the sound of entitlement discovering its real price. For years, my family had mistaken my patience for permission. That Christmas, I gave them the one gift they never expected from me, a boundary they couldn't return. We appreciate you staying with us through this story. This video is completely fictional and created only for entertainment and reflection. Not everyone deserves a chance to explain themselves after ignoring every chance they had to actually care. Sometimes an explanation comes too late, and protecting your own peace matters more than reopening a conversation that should have happened years earlier.